Hi, I will talk about handling information for L1 and L2 processing. It is divided in 6 parts that are selecting information, connecting, comparing, constructing, the discourse representation, anticipation, and finally the conclusion. Okay, first it is selecting information. Most of the information that the listener obtains may not have huge importance. What does it mean? That the listeners have to make judgments on the relevance and importance of they had understood. For this, there is a process of 3 parts that are abandon, store, and generalize. Abandon, it is delay the information. Store, it is retain the information. And generalize, it is retain the information but without details. That is for L1 processing. And for the L2 processing, it is a 2 parts process that are selecting relevant points and recognizing redundancy. For selecting relevant points, the listener has to recognize the main point in a conversation, the main points in a conversation, and the main point of the conversation. And in recognizing redundancy, they have to recognize when it is the repetition and when it is the addition. 2. Connecting. For establish a relationship between the incoming information and the listener's understanding, it is helpful for the listener to decide whether the information extends a current point or mark a new departure. Extend at the current point, it means fall in the same paragraph, and mark a new departure, it means start a new one. What is a paragraph? It's like when we are reading a paragraph, it has information with the same structure, and when we change the paragraph, the main topic it changed. Third, comparing. The operation requires the listener to compare incoming information against the discourse for check possible inconsistencies, resulting in a failure of understanding on the part of the listener. That for the L1 process. And for the L2 processing, it has a process called self-monitoring, that it consists in find inconsistency in what are we listening and comparing point of view. Fourth, constructing. As more and more information is received, listeners have to impose a pattern upon the discourse representation being built up. For the L1 processing, they have an order. It can be hierarchical or linear. And for the L2 processing, it doesn't have a order like L1 has. We, as learners, we have a partial understanding. The partial understanding, it means that we prefer to localize and identify main aspects and main points. 5. The discourse representation, dealing with uncertainty. The decisions that a listener makes when adding new pieces of information to an ongoing discourse representation. So it is divided into parts: on indeterminate representations and 2. Laying the foundations. For the L1 process, the studies have found that the listener is not equal to the reader. The listener is not support for a physical evidence as the reader is. So it is not the same as the L2 learners that they have noticed that a listener has more they identify more main points that a reader, but no so much details. And the laying on the foundations for L1, a listener begins to construct a discourse representation from the very beginning for a listener encounter. So, as it is their L1, they can predict what will be said and speculate words in a conversation. And for the L2 processing, the instruction has to be given for the thinking to start. For we to start thinking about we are listening, we have to have an order. The learners, they have become more competent for the teacher can extend the accept that is played. And finally, the anticipation. It is a hard process because the anticipation, it is like, no, what are you talking? No, what are you will listen? So as you are not in the context, you can guess what are you will listen. So the process of anticipating what the speaker will say includes listening skills methodologies. That's for L2. For L1, well, it is obvious that they can anticipate what will they listen. It doesn't mean like you know what the other person talk about. It is just like you know what you will listen, like the kind of vocabulary and those kind of things. And I guess that's all. Thank